Hi everyone, this is Beck from the Twisting Twine and welcome to today's video on how to crochet the mesh stitch using a 3-chain pattern. To start with, you'll need to have your number of chain stitches in multiples of 2 plus 1. So for example, if I wanted to have a 20 chains across, I would need to add 1 chain to that, so making 21 as my foundation row for my mesh stitch using the 3-chain pattern. To begin, we're going to do a slip stitch in the 3rd chain from the hook. So inserting our hook through that 3rd chain, yarn over, drag it through, and then dragging it through again that existing stitch or loop that had been on our hook. And we get this odd looking little loop, I suppose we could call it, at the end of our row there. Chain 3, skip 1 chain, and then insert our hook through the next chain after that skip chain. So it's basically missing 1 chain and slip stitch into the next one after that. Chain 3 again, skip 1 chain in our foundation row, insert our hook into the next one after that, slip stitch again. And we get these funny looking little arches, I suppose, or loops we could call them. Chaining 3 again, and we just basically continue with this pattern until we get to the end of the row. So chaining 3, skipping a chain, slip stitch into the next chain until we get to the end. Feel free to pause the video and then restart when you get to the very end of your row. The very last slip stitch should go into the very last chain on that row. So here we are at the end of the row, and that last slip stitch is going into the last chain of the row. And when we look at that first row of mesh stitch, it looks like a wonky line. To begin our second row, we're going to chain 3, and then we do a slip stitch right through the very first loop from our previous row. So there's no need to go through the chains, you just do it right around it. Slip stitch. And this first loop in each row looks a little different, a little odd, smaller in comparison to the other loops that you'll have for the remainder of your row. We then chain 3 again, and we do a slip stitch right in the middle of that next loop. And this continues, chaining 3, slip stitch in the loop until you get to the end of your row. When you do get to the very last slip stitch, your hook goes through that odd little loop that we had from the first row, just like this. So that last slip stitch goes through there. And this is what it should look like when you've got a couple of rows of your mesh stitch. This is what you should have after you've done a few more rows of your mesh stitch. The 3-chain pattern is a really close, sort of tight stitch. It has a lot of stretch to it, as you can see. And because of the slip stitch, it stretches both ways, which is great for items that need a little bit of give to them. You will find with the mesh stitch that it has a self-sustaining straight edge unless you are intentionally wanting to add additional loops. Thank you for joining me today in learning how to crochet the 3-chain mesh stitch. If you're looking for a pattern to use this stitch in, check out our video tutorial or free pattern on our blog for the Berry Sweet headscarf. And as always, happy crocheting!